I'm going to show you a better way to do downward facing dog with the power of anatomy. I'm Dr. Anthony Davis, and downward facing dog has always kind of bugged me because of the forces on the sacroiliac joint and the cues that we are giving people, which are impossible to achieve. So you got to realize there's a lot going on in downward facing dog, right? We have our hands on the floor. We have to get full shoulder flexion. We have to get our arms completely over our heads. We're being asked to lengthen our spine out and lift our tailbone. And then somehow, magically, we're supposed to get our feet flat on the floor without rounding our back. Yeah, there are some people who can do that, but they are outliers. They are genetically hypermobile people. Most people cannot achieve all of those things at the same time. It's very, very difficult. So this is, in my opinion, a better way to approach downward facing dog. Essentially what we're going to do is prioritize. Well, what do we care about more in downward facing dog? Do we care more about a good long line from the arms, the hands, the shoulders to the tailbone? Or do we care more about getting the feet flat to the floor? Because for most people, we cannot have both. Let me grab that skeleton. I'm going to show you why. So the hamstrings muscles connect right here on your sitting bone, also known as your ischial tuberosity. And then they connect down here across the knee, so either on this side or on this side of the knee. But they cross the knee here. So what happens is that as you're stretching the leg forward and getting a hamstring stretch, the hamstrings are pulling on this sitting bone. And that's going to cause a rotation in the pelvis where this ilium posteriorly rotates. So it moves this direction. Now, if the posterior tilt of the ilium is moving this way, right? Meanwhile, the body is folding forward, right, through the spine. And so the sacrum, which is right here, is going the other way. The sacrum is going forward, okay? It's nutating, it's going forward. So this entire pelvic bone, the innominate bone, is moving this way, okay? And the sacrum is moving this way. So we've got shearing basically or torsion really, at the sacroiliac joint. In other words, your tight hamstrings are trying to pull your pelvis in one direction while your spine is being pulled in the other direction. And then we get pain in that sacroiliac joint region. Seems to be really common in yoga practitioners. So they tend to get this pain right here, these two spots, right here and right here. And I see this in clinic so commonly, where people have pain and they say, it hurts right here and right here, both sides, really low, right by the waistband, right there. Well, it's probably sacroiliac joint pain, and it's probably not helpful to continue to irritate it with deep, forceful forward folding. So here's a better way to do downward facing dog that uses strength and stability and prioritizes a nice, long, expanded spine and deprioritizes or de-emphasizes the heels to the floor. So the simple way of saying this is that we're just going to do a downward facing dog with really, really bent knees. Well, because if we bend the knees, it's less tension on the hamstrings that pulls the pelvis less forcefully into posterior rotation, right? So now we aren't forcing the pelvis to rotate back and then have the sacrum be forced in the other direction. So it just lightens the load, the stresses on the low back. So that wouldn't be alone a good video. So I want to show you how I actually get into it, because I think the way we get into it is more interesting. So there are two ways that we can get into this. One of the ways is that we can kind of borrow from the DNS system, dynamic neuromuscular stabilization, and we can do kind of a bear position where we basically hover the knees. So we're in a quadruped position here, tabletop, then hover the knees. This is going to require a lot of core stability. And then from here, we keep the knees bent and we just push through the hands until the hips go high and the knees go sort of out to the sides a little bit. So that could be our position. And we could even do, quadruped, knees hovered, and then we could press back. We could make a little vinyasa out of this. We could inhale forward, and then we could slowly exhale back. This is a great exercise right here. This is a great flow. The other way that we can do this, that I kind of enjoy, is that we go into a child's pose here. So we get used to child's pose for a little bit, and then we get used to going from tabletop back to child's pose. And then we start doing child's pose with our toes tucked under. And then we gradually get used to hovering the knees, and the knees are hovered when we go to kind of a knees hovered child's pose. So it's kind of like you're playing that children's game of leapfrog. So we're getting ready to pounce forward. By the way, this would be really good if you're starting to get used to arm balances and you want to get used to your knees into your chest. Well, if we can hover here, we can press the butt back, hover the knees. Maybe that's a good place to start working on arm balances, but that's for another video. So if we can start working into that knees hovered child's pose, then we can start to say, okay, let's keep those knees in. And now all we do, we keep our chest glued to our thighs. Your thighs and your chest are glued together and they are not coming apart. Now try to press your hips up to the sky. And you're not going to be able to straighten your knees if your chest remains glued to your thighs. And then we can sit the hips back towards the heels again. We can press up and then exhale back, right? So we can turn this into a little bit of a flow. Inhale, you'll feel a little stretch in the hamstrings even though the knees are still bent, and then come back down. And then we can press up, and then we can kind of settle in here. And now this is our downward facing dog, right? This is kind of our leapfrog position. This is like kind of our bear position. I really don't know what to call it because it's kind of in between a couple of poses. But this way we can really push through the arms. We can really lengthen our tailbone up towards the sky and create a nice long spine. And we aren't forcing any kind of position in people that don't have the mobility to achieve it anyway. And frankly, who cares? If we're just trying to get a calf stretch, why do we have to stretch the hamstrings to their maximum at the same time that we stretch our calves to the maximum? That downward facing dog is a very difficult position. Not to mention, it's a sciatic nerve tensioner. So especially the way that we perform it traditionally, where we're doing this and our, we're straight here, and then we look towards our belly button. That is a sciatic nerve tensioner. That means that we're pulling our brain and spinal cord forward as we pull on the nerves this way. And if you have low back pain or shooting pain down the leg, you get that sciatica. This is a good way to piss off your sciatic nerve. So it's not that it's dangerous for everybody, but a lot of people, that's going to be super irritating. So why do we need to forcefully stretch our sciatic nerve in order to stretch our calves? Why can't we just do a lunge and stretch our calves or do any number of other calf stretches, right? It doesn't have to be everything at the same time, especially again, when we're stretching our brain, spinal cord, and nerves, sciatic nerves, instead of really just getting a hamstring stretch. If you want a hamstring stretch, do it. If you want a calf stretch, do it. If you want both at the same time, well, that's cool too, but let's make sure that we're not pissing off the sciatic nerve. So a lot of reasons why I think that approaching this with bent knees, and by the way, I didn't cue the head, I would be looking down, straight down at the floor. So I'm looking at the mat underneath me. I'm not tucking my chin. I'm not looking all the way forward. I'm looking straight down at the mat. Maybe a little bit towards the feet, but pretty much straight down or slightly under where my chest would be. If there's a pose that you'd like me to take an anatomical look at as a doctor of chiropractic and someone who deals with pain and rehabilitation, I'd love to analyze poses if you're interested. So comment below and tell me what you want to see. I'm Dr. Anthony Davis. Movement is medicine, motion is lotion. So be sure to move your body every single day.